Hello there. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, that's right. It's Rail Natter. It's a Wednesday evening. It's past 8 p.m. Reliably late. It's episode 203 of Rail Natter, the long (long) history of the Transpennine Route Upgrade. Ooh. There's people in the chat. Hello, everyone in the chat. Jack Elliott was at a climate change meeting last night with Leo Murray. Hello, yeah, Leo, friend of the show. We didn't do the episode on riding sunbeams. We will eventually do the episode on riding sunbeams, but Leo and I have some. We're up to stuff. Let's just put it that way. Just watch this space. Anyway, Transpennine Route Upgrade. What can we say about this? If I'd remember to be clicking in the right thing, what can we say about this?
Whether you're racing home to get the kids tucked up, going to gigs garnished in glitter and fully feather-bowered, or off on a ramble to a well-deserved roast and apple crumble, the Transpennine Route Upgrade will make journeys faster. And with plans to go fully electric, we'll be cutting our emissions too. The Transpennine Route Upgrade. On track to better.
Okay, so the logo's weird, but the adverts are fun. Look, that's a weird advert. But this is a bit weird. I didn't understand. They had, to be fair, a really what is now quite dated logo before, but it kind of made more sense. What is this? Is this the Ordsel chord? But in viewed, I don't like with the bridge. The bridge but viewed, they've kind of turned it over 92. I don't fully understand the logo, but I do like the style of the the adverts. I think they're fun. They're fun stop motion. Yes, we're talking about the Transpennine Route Upgrade, everyone. At least we're talking about what led to the current incarnation of the project. We're not going to be talking about. Oh, people are saying that it's gone now, but the on track to better thing. Yeah, I agree, it's stupid. Yeah, Alex Evans agrees that it's stupid. There might be lots of Transpennine people who work for the project. Given that I currently work on and have been working on Transpennine for years, this is not a slag off Transpennine Route Upgrade episode. There's plenty wrong in the project, surely, but fundamentally, it's a project that should have been happening decades ago. So this episode is about. This is about one we will explain some more about what it actually is momentarily. This episode is not about what the actual project is necessarily, as in detail. It's not about the ins and outs of the current iteration of the project. It's about how we got to the current iteration of the project. By and large, the current Transpennine Route Upgrade refers to this. I'm not going to go in detail because at some point we'll get one of the engineering lead for the project to come on and actually talk materially about what it is and how it's being delivered. In the meantime, we need to get on with the show. Everyone, welcome to tonight's Rail Natter. As the Intercity 225 fades away, it's a little bit seat of the pants because until 7 minutes ago I was bouncing a poor little one who still hasn't fallen asleep. Bless him. And I always prefer her to have gone to sleep by this point because it means that I'm not abandoning my post, as it were, whereas I have somewhat abandoned my post for tonight's episode. So you're all very lucky. Anyway. We have to start with asking the question, what is the Transpennine route? What is it? What is that? It means all sorts of things, but to answer this question, let us turn to Open Railway Map. Good old Open Railway Map. So, okay, yeah, there's a screenshot from Open Railway Map, but let us turn to, let's look at, I'll tell you what, let's look at electrification, because it's quite useful to see that. So black is unelectrified, red is electrified or soon to be electrified, which is interesting because of some of the discussions we'll talk about soon. The Transpennine route refers to the route from Manchester Victoria, over here, there's Manchester Victoria, is here, and Manchester Piccadilly. That Manchester route refers to the connection from both of these stations up to Stalybridge. So you've got this both stations. Both of those Manchester termini have routes, paths through to Stalybridge. Then it refers to the line from Stalybridge up through Diggle, through Stanage Tunnel or Diggle tunnels, through Marsden, Slough, into Huddersfield, Mirfield, Dewsbury, and then up into Leeds. That is the Transpennine route. There are other paths, route, kind of lines that cross the Pennines that we've talked about in a previous episode. But the Transpennine route refers to essentially what is called the Huddersfield line. Kind of generally in timetabling terms, it's called the Huddersfield line, and that's what we're referring to. It's the main intercity route between Manchester and Leeds. Oh, you know what? Let's attach my face to the corner. Hello, it's me. Christoph et al. Is indeed referring to specifically this episode 3, 200 episodes ago, where we talked about rail over the Pennines and talked about... actually, we kind of alluded to this episode in a way. Some foreshadowing happened. We talk about how many lines there are over the Pennines, but that there is a single route that is the Transpennine route, and it's basically the Huddersfield line. So that's the Transpennine route. And we talked a little bit back in episode 101 with Jem Williams, we talked about a little bit about what we're going to touch on. We graced the subject that we're going to be talking about in more detail tonight. So, on which subject, what are the origins and history of the Transpennine Route Upgrade? This is the question we're going to answer today. This is what it's all about. Hello, Richard Fraser. Hello, Richard Moody. Hello to all the people on here who are indeed from... Oh, hello, Deirdre. Thanks for your comment. In fact, that's a good point, actually. I'm going to go big face briefly. So I'm just going to tease you. That's what we're going to do tonight. But briefly, I'm going to go big face and say, hello, everyone. Thanks for all your feedback on the Ireland primer episode. Lots of good feedback. A subject that you're all very passionate about, which is cool. There's definitely more work to be done on shaping the rail natter thesis of rail in Ireland. So I'm keen to have, very much make your guest suggestions. If there are like-minded rail nerds across the Irish Sea, let's get them on the episode and they can talk about things. Certainly, we looked at the narrow scope of, in terms of receptors, we just looked at population, as indeed Deirdre and others have pointed out. There are other useful receptors, ports, civil service hubs, universities, a good proxy. So there are other things at play that should help shape that kind of idealized network. And for sure, we touched on some of it in the origin in the first episode there, but there's more to be done. Keen to explore, keen to find excuses to get friends of the show on. So make your suggestions. Anyway, I digress. Let's miniaturize my face again and tackle the question at hand. What indeed are the origins and history of the Transpennine Route Upgrade? Lots of fun stuff. Yeah, good, lovely. Yes, the answer to this question is, will the government get away with the rail betrayal? Is yeah, because they just did it worse and worse, didn't they? How painful. So we start with Selneck. We start with the South East Lancashire, North East Cheshire. What is now kind of morphed back and forth into being the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. But actually, the boundaries are slightly different, although very similar. Selneck, of course, got obliterated when government did its government centralisation push later on. But for now, we start with Selneck. And Selneck had a problem, as they perceived it. They had two separate railway networks within their boundary. They had the northern suburban railway network out of Victoria Station, and they had the southern suburban railway network out of Piccadilly Station. Neither of these made much. They're good. They're a good system. Arguably, we should have retained quite a few of them, not as switching to Metrolink, but actually continue to run them as high intensity kind of metro services. But anyway, these suburban services, also worth saying, a lot of service sharing with long distance services, which is the recurring problematic theme of tonight's episode. It's funny you say extremely 80s logo. Selneck, that Selneck logo is actually quite a bit earlier than that. This is a late 60s, early 70s logo. So yeah, it's certainly very vibesy. Doorhanger 93 for sure. David Frankel is here, by the way. Hi, David. This is not going to be a Manchester episode, by the way. This is a Transpennine episode, but there is a key pinch point on this network, and we're not actually going to talk a huge amount about it, but that key pinch point is relevant to the overall picture. So Victoria's suburban network, Piccadilly's suburban network, a legacy of varying railway companies and the geography of central Manchester. And Cellnex realised they needed to join these up, and so to do this, they came up with a bit of a plan. Said plan being the Pic-Vic line. Here it is. And we're very much in the early 1970s at this point. Cellnex proposed the Pic-Vic line. Manchester's underground rail link, a vital need for the whole region now. And what did this propose? We've got this rather nice graphic here pointing out what is involved with the tunnel and the infrastructure. But let's kind of take a little look at what's actually on the cards here. So, in order to connect Piccadilly Station, there was the lines from Piccadilly kind of go out like this. There was a big, giant flying junction, grade separated junction to take the lines off, drop down into a tunnel, and then there was a big curve going through multiple stations. So Piccadilly low level, Whitworth Station, Central Station, Royal Exchange, Victoria low level at Victoria Station. So you have these two low level stations at Piccadilly. And Piccadilly would have been in the Undercroft, about where the current Metrolink platforms are ish. And then the tracks would have continued and merged with another flying junction up this end, merged with the lines towards Staley Bridge up there. So and off towards that side of Manchester, and that was the point. It was to provide a high density connection. It would also provide footfall into the city centre directly off kind of high mass transit. It was a good idea, and it would have, from a suburban railway network perspective, it's worth saying this is a suburban solution. This was not about long distance connectivity. This was about providing through journeys that were otherwise not really possible for people, kind of connecting those two systems. So the various, if we go back to this map, the various branches of the northern and southern suburban network would have been connected through this high density core. It's a pretty standard modus operandi for European railway networks, where you build a core like this instead of multiple terminating stations. It's a pretty standard thing. We don't do it very often in the UK, but Gareth is asking if I'm going to mention the reason for the huge curve in Pic-Vic. Multiple reasons for the big curve. Some of them are about underground caverns for communication systems and various bits and pieces. Gareth, what's your reason you have? Richard Fraser saying Manchester population 2.7 million needs more transport if you want to balance with London. Absolutely, Richard. Yeah, it's ridiculous that Manchester does not have a multi-line underground system, let alone fighting over the scraps of like one single line. Based and Stadtschnellbahn Pild, absolutely, Martha, yeah, for sure. Oh, the nuclear bunker, yeah, for sure. Everyone always likes their fun nuclear bunkers. Anyway, right, let's jump forwards, because it's not this bit, very important for everyone to understand. This connection here between Piccadilly and Victoria is not the end of the story, because there are two key pieces of infrastructure asset up here and up here. One of them is Ardwick Junction, and the other one is Slade Lane Junction. And you have, so here's Ardwick Junction, which is on the approaches to Piccadilly. Piccadilly. Someone catch me if I've got these the wrong way around. I don't think. In fact, you know what? Let's just quickly, because I've suddenly doubting myself. Ardwick Junction is Ardwick. I think I am right here. Yes, I am right. Good. Reassuring. So, yes. Get rid of you. So, yeah, Ardwick Junction. So that's up in the direction of... So there's the kind of terminal platforms of Piccadilly. And then this would have sent this off down into the tunnel. Here, your tracks off down into the tunnel, which then would have looping around and meeting... where are we? Let's just have a look at what the orientation is of this drawing. Basically meeting and providing grade separation for... that's coming in here. Basically another grade separated junction to tidy up the connectivity between the new system and the existing lines north of Victoria. So you have these two grade separated junctions, which are absolutely critical to the functioning of this suburban system, to not get in the way of the existing regional long distance services, really key component in providing that uplifting capacity. This is foreshadowing, folks. Matt Reed is here. Matt, hello, lovely to see you in here. It's lovely to see lots of friends in here. Martha, Gareth, Jack, Daniel, lots of friends in here. Peter's here as well. Lovely to see you all. Right, so 1971, Selneck propose the Pic-Vic tunnel. You'll recognise this graphic because I used it in episode 101, but I've modified it and updated it and added extra data, so stay tuned for that. So 1971, this is getting pitched hard. There's all sorts of graphics and communications kind of saying yes to Pic-Vic now. This is what we can gain. Look at all the traffic. It's a pretty forward-thinking and colourful and optimistic-looking and very 70s vibes. Actually, it's quite late 60s vibes, to be honest. But it's it's very vibesy, turn of that decade vibes, aiming at what can be gained by this underground railway. And there's lots of fun history behind. There's a really good Inframank PDF that you can download that talks about several infrastructure stories in Manchester. Very interesting. It's part of a gallery from a long while back. It's got some lovely images in there, high-res photos, scans and stuff. It talks about some of the science that went into some of the pioneering transport science that went into justifying and defining why this system made sense, including the fact that their magical black box also suggested that the system would make most sense underground. There's all sorts of interesting, and indeed define the depth, because it was considering the depth of passenger flow vertically. Anyway, all sorts of interesting history there that we're not going to get into because this isn't the main event that we're talking about. At some point we'll talk about Pic-Vic in great detail and attempt to speak to experts, historians, and even maybe try and have a look at where it might have gone. Anyway, however, let us jump to the real world again. So we have this lovely graphic here, Pic-Vic project. You can see that Selneck has been replaced by the Greater Manchester Council. We've had some changes. The GMC is here, arguably with an equally based sort of graphic ident. I think this is awesome. However, let us look at this Department of the Environment, which had at that time had gobbled up the Department for Transport. Sorry. So I'm writing. This is a letter from the D of E, including the transport sector section, writing to Manchester, to the GMC. Let's see. I'm writing to tell you that I'm unable to approve the infrastructure grant application in respect of the Pic-Vic tunnel. I regret having to do this. I know the importance which the PTA, that's the Passenger Transport Authority, it's a kind of an element of the Passenger Transport Executive that had been brought in 1968, and indeed the Metropolitan County attached to the project, and I appreciate the hard work which has been put in by the PTE and others to reach the present position. Basically, this was look, that's right, Treasuries say no. Now, when does this sound familiar? So there we are. Who's this prick? The Chancellor of the Exchequer. Oh, okay, so it's it's a Treasury situation. Well, funny that. So yes, this gets binned. Pic-Vic, a solution to improve both suburban and long distance capacity by splitting those services out, gets canned off. And indeed, that's 1973. God, that was loud. That's 1973. Sorry for deafening everyone's ears. GMC don't give up. They keep pushing harder, and they spend more money on more graphical stuff to kind of point out how critical this project is. There's an interesting little comment here from the editor of Railway Gazette International that I think summarises a lot of what we've talked about in the past. So let me just read this. This is the editor of Railway Gazette International, still Exton. I've written for them. That's kind of cool. But back in 1974, they have this to say. Pic-Vic planning has also been bedeviled by the rail... Actually, I need to try and do Manchester. Pic-Vic planning has also been bedeviled by the Railway Board's determination to give absolute priority to the intercity passengers. If local trains might conflict with projected high-speed schedules for 1988, the PTE must pay now for extra tracks and signalling. This kind of thinking has inflated the cost of the Pic-Vic scheme to hundreds of millions of pounds. I don't know why I've made the editor of the Railway Gazette International from Manchester, but in my slightly dodgy Mancunian accent. But let's face it, probably a Londoner. I don't know, actually. Who was the editor at the time? Nick, if you're listening, tell me who your previous incumbent was in 1974. Thank you, Nick Kingsley. Anyway, so that's a really interesting conflict here. It's that conflict between intercity passengers. This is a thing I've talked about with beaching. If you remember, this is barely 10 years after reshaping had been released. And what have I talked about? What have we said in Rail Natter? The main problem with reshaping and all the attitudes around it was the prioritisation of intercity services at the expense, using existing infrastructure, therefore entirely at the expense of suburban capacity. PTE is Passenger Transport Executive. So Passenger Transport Authority is kind of the operating arm of a passenger transport executive. Passenger transport executives, there's an episode in it, but go back to Martha's episode actually, where Martha talks about the passenger transport executives. Martha, who is in the chat and can answer even more detailed, I'm sure. Passenger transport executives created by Barbara Castle in the 1968 Transport Act. A good idea, among other things. Basically PTE, PTA are the devolved transport entities. In this case, the board is National British Rail and causing problems here. You can kind of understand why. Their strategy is prioritise the profitable bit, which is the long distance service. They don't have any infrastructure to allow them to do anything different. So in a way, this isn't so much an indictment on British Rail, more on the broad policy that came out of reshaping. So 1973, and it continues to be cancelled. And indeed, in 1977. The final, basically there's a political change in the GMC, the Tories get in and they change priority. And indeed, they change priority to push things towards, the political change facilitates a change in who is looking at some form of solution in Manchester, and British Rail pick up. So good old British Rail, here they are. I should have done the hallelujah thing there for BR. BR in 1977 pick up an alternative which is called the Castlefield Curve. And the intent of this is to provide the same connectivity through, but crucially it only involves, British Rail start realising and pointing out that there is some serious heavy infrastructure work to do at the approaches, the kind of the outside of Manchester approaches to both Victoria and Piccadilly. And so these guys come in again, and what do they say? Oh, they say no. That's the end of that. So we see the end of the Castlefield Curve, or do we? Meanwhile, the city authority is trying to work out different ways to do things, and they start mucking around with they start prototyping and thinking of an alternative solution through central Manchester. An attempt again to essentially segregate local services, suburban sort of, or not services, but certain suburban flows, to separate suburban flows from regional and long distance flows in the form of Metrolink. There are lots of other reasons behind it as well. There's a lot of conflict in thinking between bus and train at the time. There's a lot of people who are anti-rail and see buses as still being the future. So there's a lot of complexity within the nuances of why Metrolink appeared, but it did appear. Socorro is asking, Castlefield Curve wasn't part of those plans yet, was it? Yes, it was. So 1979, Castlefield Curve was the BR plan to resolve the issues. To provide the connectivity that Pic-Vic had allegedly intended to. So we have Metrolink appearing in 1984, and being proposed at least, studies starting and transport plans, local transport plans, etc. At the time, kind of around this time, kind of in this interbellum here, in this kind of period, so between here and scribble. So from here onwards, there was a problem basically, which was that lots of other cities like Liverpool, like Newcastle, and indeed like Glasgow had successfully got lumps of cash out of central government. Manchester had bided its time a little to work up, Manchester being a very large city, to work up more detailed plans, well thought through plans, as well as kind of all the road stuff. And as a result of that, there was a change in terms of it. There was another centralisation of power, a change in the way that local authorities and cities could apply for grant funding, and essentially they fell through the cracks. The Pic-Vic proposals fell through the cracks. Another issue is that if we jump back to this this letter here, unfortunately, this this statement of we're having to spend this much less was not at the expense of a substantial amount of road building at the time, and it was decided that road building would not be stymied, and public transport would be. That was a political decision made by the government at the time. Let's jump through all the horns and honking and remind ourselves what's going on. So, Metrolink. Yes, so Metrolink is not being built yet, but the project, the thoughts of what it might look like is starting to rumble on. Meanwhile, enter regional railways in 1990. So we've reached we've nearly 20 years have passed already by this point. 1990. What's happening in 1990? Well, actually, I need to grab something and bring it up to assist me in the subtle nuances and details. No, in fact, you get to experience that for a brief second because I'm very good at my job. So let me just bring this down here and remind myself. So, 1990, there is a study that is brought out. We're gonna have a look at this study. 1990, there's a study, and here is the Modern Railways article on that study, which I think is going to be interesting to look at. We're gonna have a little look at this Modern Railways article. So, British Rail has appointed a project manager, North Transpennine Electrification, Mr. Stuart Dick, no laughing, to examine the case for both the Bradford area electrification, Leeds to Bradford, Leeds Bradford to Ilkley, and Leeds Bradford to Skipton, and for the North Transpennine electrification study. So what's funny here is, yes, this is looking at Bradford area electrification. So this is like really the Leeds Northwest suburban electrification, which we did eventually get. So that succeeded. That did get through. But also what is called, and continues to be called in some instances, certainly in terms of legislation, North Transpennine electrification, which in this case is Leeds, York, Hull to Liverpool, North Wales. So it's the full, as you can see, the routes being electrified are or rather, you can see the routes being considered for electrification are this core through Manchester through Liverpool into Manchester, across the Transpennine route, and then out to York, down to Hull, and then the dash bits is stuff that, if you remember, 1990, we've got East Coast Main Line electrification. So electrification is kind of in vogue at this point. So this study comes out of that, and also, as we've seen, this happens. We know that this happens. So that's arguably a success. Interesting they didn't merge this into a Leeds, Bradford, Manchester electrification. Well, yeah, but the thing is, there was a convenient network. You can see, if I get rid of my John Maddening, you can see that they're consolidating the routes. As always, they're prioritising certain routes. So they're prioritising the route to Bradford from the north, so that you don't have to electrify double the number of lines. So they're prioritising that route for Bradford, and then this route down to Manchester. So it's avoiding doing double the amount of electrification work, whilst also connecting up into those kind of otherwise deprived areas up ex kind of industrial areas up in Ilkley, Skipton, Keighley, all these places. So let's continue going through here. So timescale on the Bradford scheme is short. So the Bradford scheme, fine. And this is all happening. There's grant stuff going on. The Transpennine study is considering a range of options. And so although the core route from Leeds to Stalybridge is established, costs and benefits will be evaluated for the route from Stalybridge via Manchester Piccadilly and Warrington Central against the route via Manchester Victoria and St Helens Junction to Liverpool. So kind of looking at A and B here, which Victoria or Piccadilly, fine. On the basis of recent routing policy, it is likely that if electrification is chosen, the route would be via Manchester Piccadilly. Certainly Warrington Central on the Piccadilly route attracts more passengers than St Helens Junction on the other route. The Warrington Central route is advantageous for services to North Wales. Interesting. So we'll skip the North Wales bit. What's also interesting is they talk about, obviously Greater Manchester's devolved government talking about, authority rather, talking about Manchester to Blackpool electrification, which we know has now happened under what's called NWEP. And indeed it believes that this demands higher priority than the Transpennine route. They're not necessarily incorrect. This is referring to the introduction of Metrolink here, which is quite interesting. Okay, fine. On the east of the Pennines, the service is being examined: York Leeds, Hull Leeds, Leeds to Stalybridge with the long tunnels in Morley and Standage is the most expensive bit to electrify. Absolutely. Neither York to Leeds or Hull to Leeds is expensive. Leeds to Neville Hill is complete. Yeah, that's still true today, painfully. This is the uncomfortable thing, isn't it? Dear me. Yes, so let's go through here. Demand not very high, problems Hull lead. So there's all sorts of interesting bits and pieces to pick out here. There's also discussions being, considerations for rolling stock and what the rolling stock would look like, EMU rolling stock, potential consideration of purchasing Class 323s, which is quite interesting. They're being used on the electrified cross-city line in Birmingham. Yes, this is 1990, isn't it? It's this slightly strange transition period from like very BR-looking BR, but also 323s on the cross-city line, which are still running on the cross-city line and still, frankly, feel pretty fresh as trains. So it's interesting, isn't it? You've still got like mixed sort of engineering trains kind of going through with brake vans and stuff. It's interesting transitory period. What else can we read here? So there's also this stuff. This is fun here. Development of metro services in Glasgow, lol. And then, look, London plans and extensions. Oh, I wonder if any of the plans that in London will get scaled back. So obviously, Crossrail. There's lots of other stuff. Docklands Light Rail is getting huge amounts of money. Underground is getting huge amounts of money at this point. Yeah, well, actually not quite yet, but Crossrail particularly. Also the Chelsea Hackney line getting mentioned. Anyway, we digress. We're not going to focus on what London's getting. We're talking about what the North doesn't end up getting. So there's other stuff. Considering road, there's discussion about roads as alternatives, rail investment alternatives. There's lots of interesting stuff. So there's like lots of tempering language about electrification, but they do commission a study. So 1990, a study gets commissioned. 1991 to 92, we see construction of the first bit of Metrolink. It actually opens, which is good news. Meanwhile, on our Transpennine route, so we're talking about that route, the long distance services across the Pennines. What's going on here? Well, 1992, 1990, what's happening at this time? I wonder. Well, here's a debate. Actually, this is an interesting one. So this is a debate in 1992. Protection of neighbouring properties, January 13th, 1992. This is specifically talking, this is the King's Cross Railways Bill. What's this about, I wonder? Let's jump down to this section here. Mr. Smith MP, talking about all the money being spent on the King's Cross low level station that could actually be spent on let's see, this is in Parliament, discussions of electrification of the Midland Main Line, which is guessed at 350 million, lol. 750 million for the West Coast Main Line, that was part of the Intercity 250 project, lol. And 400 million for electrification of the Transpennine routes. So we see this discussion, the Transpennine routes, plural by the way as well. So this is interesting. So it's like people being sceptical of investing in a new station in King's Cross, which actually would have been a good idea. What's interesting is the next interjection related to the 1.5 billion quid is from a certain Jeremiah Crobnins. Remember this guy? Jeremy Corbyn. I represent the other half of Islington, and lots of discussions about the fact that turning it into a big property development scheme, it doesn't actually seem like a good idea when you could put a lot of affordable housing in there and make it something as a social good. Inclined to agree, Jeremy. Anyway, if you want to learn more about that, those discussions, go back to episode 79, which is a great episode, why there is no HS1, HS2 link, and how should you look if there was, anyway. But also other discussions. Let's jump forward to 1994. So the Railways Act 1993, you might remember, has just been passed. Indeed, here is a discussion, a long speech, indeed, by the late, great Mr. Frank Dobson MP, or the Right Honourable, I presume he's a Right Honourable, certainly the Honourable Frank Dobson MP, absolutely whipping up a storm, discussing, again, electrification of the Transpennine Link. He's talking about the cost of electrification, which is being assumed at this point to be £446 million in 1993 figures. What happened to all of these characters, I wonder? The WMR 323s are moving to Northern. Oh, that's exciting, isn't it? There's some similar 323. Are there 323s up on Northern already? There's some very similar units, I'm sure. On which bits? Yeah, there's some similar ones up here, I'm sure of it. Anyway, so of course this is discussion of the Railways Act 1993. So things change at this point. BR had been planned. I mean, BR in the early 90s kind of knew that bad things were on the horizon, but not certainly. So they were planning for the future. Hence the discussions about potential electrification, and some of that works. We got the He was a cabinet minister. Oh yeah, of course he had been a cabinet minister. Yes, Privy Council. Therefore, absolutely yes, he would have been right honourable. Not that I particularly care for such things, but in any case, episode 148. If you want to find out every way that the Railways Act screwed everything up, but let's talk specifically about Transpennine improvements. So we had seen the introduction of the Class 158s, which had improved capacity a fair amount, improved speeds, and most importantly, given air-conditioned, pleasant, and nominally intercity feeling long-distance services across the Pennines. And, oh look, this is being written in March 1994, I think probably is this Modern Railways again? Yeah, this is Modern Railways again. So this is it. So the number of 3-car Class 158 sets on the Transpennine route will have increased from, these are joke numbers, 8 to 14, increasing the average number of vehicles per hour between Leeds and Manchester from 7.1 to 7.8. That sounds so pitiful, frankly. But anyway, basically the point is this route has seen enormous growth since 1986. A really key point to remember. 1986, continual 13% per annum growth on average over from 86 to 94. That's some sizable 8 years of significant growth. It only got busier after that. The 158's there, so great. The 1993 saw the introduction of services into the airport, which looks suspiciously like the airport station actually. So the new station built at the airport. In fact, it's all very fancy and buffer stop, reasonable quality. 1993 was when that station opened, and so we saw that's when the service patterns started looking more like what we're used to now. Indeed, embarrassingly, it's not that different timetable-wise to what we have now, thanks to COVID cuts, etc., and the service quality. So we've got the Transpennine, and it's being referred to as it's very much now Transpennine with a trans and a capital P. So this brand is starting to emerge, the Transpennine route, in terms of the service branding. And indeed, Transpennine Express will start to emerge as a description later on. Anyway, this is regional railways still at this point. But in the process of regional railways being split into train operating units, which then became the current train operating companies. Of course, Martha's saying, of course, the 158 fleet wasn't enough for the kind of growth you got from providing a half-decent service. Yes, so they provided a half-decent service, and the 158s immediately became uncomfortably full. This will also be a common theme, folks. So let's press on. So the discussion, this is a piece talking about improvements, and at the top of this we see electrification as a key improvement. At the launch of Railtrack in November, Aidan Nelson, Director Railtrack North East Zone, stated that Railtrack endorses the long-term vision of an electrified future for the North Transpennine Corridor. So that's the Transpennine route, it's another name for it, linking Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds and York with the East Coast Main Line. A recent study by a consultancy did not show high financial benefits, although on a cost-benefit basis, wiring gets a favourable prognosis. That sentence doesn't make any sense. For electrification to proceed, it will be necessary for all the councils involved to put electrification of this route in their transport policies and programmes bids. So the TPP bids were the new thing that was introduced that resulted in Manchester missing out on a load of cash, having missed out on the direct grant funding that the PTs and the metropolitan counties got before that. This new thing, the transport policies and programmes bid that had gone to the DFT, so the DOT at the time. Anyway, electrification will give greater flexibility, is more economical than diesel operations. The preferred type of train would be a new steel-bodied electric multi-unit of a similar type to the Class 442s. Okay, take note of that. Nice little Class 442 thing. Used on the London to Bournemouth services, but with overhead power collection. The interior of the new train would be based on the interior in Intercity's pilot refurbished Mark IIIs. So, is the TPA consultancy different from the think tank? Yes, I believe it is. It's not the Taxpayers Alliance. Someone Google that. Google what TPA became. I'm curious. So Leeds to Blackpool growth, fine. So all this stuff, yeah, lots of kind of other discussions, resignaling and so on. But electrification, allegedly in 1994 on the cards, very much being developed, and essentially to have a thing like this, look, a proper intercity train, albeit slightly weird, like they've taken the front end of a Mark 1 London thing and stuck it on the front. It's these funny units that have recently just all been scrapped, haven't they? RIP. David Franklin's talking about other bits and pieces in the fact that the Windsor link opened, which enabled the service changes through Manchester, in city traffic running via Piccadilly instead of Victoria. Yes, so the various bits of work that enabled the kind of the pattern that we know now. Interestingly, there were certain changes that had happened long preceding that had fermented in the decision to close Woodhead, Buzz to Graham and to Barry, Woodhead versus Hope. So the Manchester is this linchpin in the whole of the Transpennine, the whole of the network of the Northern Railway system. So this thing as well, yeah. So this slide should have been somewhere else really, but this is just referring to the fact that the airport services had started operating. This damn thing, Manchester Airport, is starting to screw everything up by dragging trains south of Manchester, where they previously hadn't necessarily been, and so resulting in creating more conflicts to facilitate this service, and it became a very popular rail service as a result. So 1990, jump to 1995. There's some new proposals put forward by the incoming TO, or the incoming TOC taking over from the TOU in 1995. The thing is called Electric 2000. We've moved on from 442s towards a networker type train, looking very similar to the current Crossrail fleet, because that's kind of essentially what it would have been. And you can see we've got this, the Transpennine vision. So a year later, Electric 2000 is published, and we can see this description here, the Transpennine Express, as it's called. It's just continuing to be an enormous success. That's kind of the challenge here. This is a huge success, and government is unwilling to spend any money to let it continue to be a success. Very frustrating. So there's a 1992 report published suggesting that the 1992 report was a bit dampened on the spirits of for anyone who was keen for electrification. But so we ended up with this discussion of the core. So Micklefield, Leeds, Huddersfield, lots of re-signalling and assumptions of sort of various bits and pieces here. The new EMU design to replace its fleet of Class 158 diesel multiple units, Regional Railways North East has developed a design for an electric multiple unit to cope with the particularities of, and that's particularities, not peculiarities, of the Transpennine Express network, which it feels may well interest other operators. So 120 vehicles operating in 3, 4, or 5 car train sets, seen as the future requirements. Ironically, kind of close to what Transpennine currently run, a mixture of all of the above. So basically, it's saying, interestingly, with 23-meter-long coaches, which is an interesting sort of. So there's about the length of a Mark III coach, I suppose. Actually, it's just not that interesting. With 2 driving cars sandwiching a car carrying the unit's pantograph and traction equipment, fine. So basically, we end up, DCA, legendary DCA, get involved, and they end up kind of developing this interior, which, it's kind of a possible interior for a kind of a networker type vehicle that we'd see. And there's lots of discussion here about things like cost, the train fleet, the electrification, lots of overall stuff, the grant application for the funding, so on and so forth. Fine. So 1995. What happens next then? All this work, this Electric 2000 proposal for Transpennine Express. Well, meanwhile, Metrolink, by the way, is still being evolving and being developed for expansion, because they just did a bit, but in 1997 they finally started doing more. So by 1999, the system is starting to properly expand, and continues to do so. 2001, we essentially reached a point where a few interesting things. A few interesting things happened in 2001. One of the things I've not marked on here is that in 2001, the Leeds Supertram receives provisional government approval. Hooray for Leeds! Excellent, fantastic. And Transpennine Route Development, as it's called, progresses. And indeed, here is a talk being given by Graham Bunker, still going, still getting on with stuff on the railways, making a nuisance of himself. March 2001, delivered to the York Permanent Way Institution, a talk on the Transpennine Route Development. This is a chance for me to talk about the fact that upgrades to the Transpennine route precede the electrification discussions, because some of the route upgrades that are being done now for Transpennine on that route, some of the kind of improvements to to the alignments to improve journey times. That was being done via HALAD survey. I mean, obviously we've completely lost those plans and have had to completely reinvent the wheel, but basically much and such the same designs are being developed via HALAD survey in the 80s by, for one, this chap, Ken Aston, across the Pennines, and co-conspirator Ian Kitching and others doing that work. So this is very long in the tooth. Now, Matt Reed, what did happen to the Leeds Supertram idea? Oh, well, let's talk firstly about the Strategic Rail Authority. Incidentally, in 2002, Leeds Supertram gets Treasury funding approval to proceed, which is exciting, isn't it? That's very exciting. So, right, let's talk about the Strategic Rail Authority. Ostensibly a good authority, a good thing, kind of, but basically patching up a messy system. So I have mixed feelings about the success of the Strategic Rail Authority. Let's talk about why those mixed feelings exist. Here is the size of... Okay, so the Strategic Rail Authority state, they go, right, we're going to buy a whole load of new trains. We're going to upgrade capacity on the Transpennine route. And the Strategic Rail Authority, what do they do? They procure... Well, firstly, let's talk about the size of the fleet. So they start with 56 four-car trains. The SRA proposed that. That's the train operating company proposes 56 four-car trains. The Strategic Rail Authority says, no, you don't need that many. You only need 56 three-car trains. To which the train operating company is perhaps not happy, but the SRA, they're God at this point, and that what they say goes. So they reduce the size of the new fleet by about 6 times, 5 times. That's a lot of. In fact, 56 vehicles, 56 coaches taken out of that order. Also, as you might notice, they are not EMUs, they are DMUs, because the Strategic Rail Authority don't give a stuff about electrification. They do not care. Electrification is off the table. So that's the end of Transpennine electrification. Oops. Gareth is saying by a quarter, as it would be. Thank you, Gareth. Good sums. So 2001, 2003 comes along, and that's the end of that is the end of Transpennine electrification. Alas, so all that's happening at this point is Metrolink is planning for expansion, but we've lost any kind of major upgrade across the Pennines. We're just doing it with trains because trains are perceived as easy and cheaper. By the way, so the Strategic Rail Authority weren't finished, though, because having reduced the size of the order, they decided to do the same thing again. In 2004, they reduced the size of the fleet from 56 three-car 185s to 51 51 three-car 185s. So they've got rid of it. They've made the order even smaller. So they're not electrified. They're diesel. They are, as a result of the gradients over the Pennines, they are uniquely powerful and very heavy as a result. Siemens designed a very heavy train. The axle load of the 185s is enormous. So this is how many vehicles have been... So if we scoot up all the vehicles and merge them together, this is how many trains have been cut out of that order. As you can see, the Strategic Rail Authority have reduced... If we stack them all together... Almost, well, in fact, it's a huge. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's to make a perfect kind of collection here of not ordered trains. This is 33% reduction in the size of the train fleet. I'm sure this will not cause us any problems, given the enormous. Bearing in mind that's about 10 to 15% growth minimum. If not more. Actually, by this point, we're seeing 20 to 30% growth every year or certainly 15 to 20% growth every year on the Transpennine route. So reducing the size of the train order by 2 years of growth? That doesn't seem hugely sensible to me. Incidentally, that was 2004. Anyway, these trains came on, and despite the fact there were not as many of them as there should have been, they did increase overall capacity by like an additional 50% or something. So it's a big lump of additional capacity, and so line go up funnily enough, you provide more seats, those seats got filled. It got even more popular because these trains, despite being diesel, were actually pretty good. They're a pretty decent improvement on the previous experience, even though I love the 158s. So, before we jump forward to 2009 and talk about problems, we need to talk about what happened in 2005, because in 2005, Treasury cancelled Leeds Supertram. Alistair Darling said no, so that's the end of Leeds Supertram. RIP. Sad times. So 2006, we see the introduction of the 185s. Happy days. The issue with these, though, is that these 185 units don't comply with new emission standards. So our lovely 185s introduced big engines, don't comply with new emission standards, which means that growth and the idea to then buy new trains is they can't buy any more new trains to top up that order because they don't meet emission standards, and it'd be expensive to retrofit. So they can't expand this fleet. The fleet is stuck at the size it is, despite this enormous growth. This is not ideal, obviously. So we reached 2009. A couple of things happened in 2009. In fact, it's worth saying, before we even hit 2009, we hit 2007. We hit to about 2007, and actually we have a problem with the existing timetable cannot be delivered with the number of trains running. So great work, Strategic Rail Authority, probably one of their biggest failures. So 2009, what happened in 2009? Network Rail put forward proposals in what they call Northern Hub, including what they refer to as the Ordsall Chord, which is just another name for the Castlefield Curve. So the Ordsall Chord, aka the Castlefield Curve, is part of these plans. There are also plans for some Metrolink. Finally, Metrolink starts building a new expansion, but we won't worry about that too much. And as we continue, so all this growth, suddenly we realise, oh wait a minute, there's no electrification. Actually, we need electrification. We need a new fleet to actually deal with this enormous increase in capacity. So, 2011, we have a re-announcement of the first time that the thing called the Transpennine Route Upgrade is re-announced, including electrification, including another rolling stock strategy. So the Transpennine Route Upgrade would include bringing in a load of Class 319s. There's a big fleet of Class 319s being cascaded by Thameslink that were then planned to be refurbished and deployed on the Transpennine route. Electric trains delivered rapidly. Meanwhile, also, there's plans for a new that was a stopgap, and then the later operator would buy a new fleet of electric trains to run over the hill. So 2011. So we've got all these plans. So we've got the Transpennine Route Upgrade building on the Northern Hub's plans to kind of provide some capacity within that bottleneck in Manchester. And on top of that, so we're seeing all this growth. So on top of that, look at this. The PM and Chancellor give the green light to develop, and this is off the government website, HS3. Interesting that they actually do call it HS3, not NPR. So HS3 gets the go-ahead across the Pennines. So, an exciting proposal from government here, and they kind of task Transport for the North to oversee this plan. A new devolved subnational transport body to develop these plans. 2014 at the Metrolink. Actually, 2014, is it the Two Cities line that opens at that point? Oh, no, it's not. It's one of the other lines, isn't it? Two Cities. The second city crossing, or whatever it's called, is a bit later, I think, isn't it? Someone shouted at me. Anyway, so what else can we learn at this point? What's going on? Yeah, that's right. 2015, as a result of NWEP and GWEP overrunning in cost and government basically being very stupid, Transpennine electrification is delayed indefinitely. Yeah, that's right. They cancel it. So Transpennine Route Upgrade, once again, is cancelled. That's the end of that. Not ideal at all. the plans for the 319s, that screws up the 319s that all end up being put in some sidings and rusting horribly, which is really bad news. Thank you, David. Yeah, David, we'll get you on to talk specifically about Manchester at some point soon. So yeah, these trains that were supposed to be refurbished, cascaded, running services across the Pennines, that's the end of that. They're in a siding, rusting. Actually, it's not the end of that, because government says, well, you know what? Why don't you work out how to make these bi-mode? Put diesel engines under these 319s. These 319s can then be they can top up capacity on the Transpennine route. I'm absolutely palming at this point, for that's obviously a very stupid suggestion. So the other thing is that in 2015, I should have said, is that the Transport and Works Act order for platforms 15 and 16 in Manchester is submitted. So I should have said in 2015, up here there should be a little like circle here. 2015, the Transport and Works Act order. So platform 15 and 16 plans are submitted. In 2016, work starts on. Actually, this is interesting. There's a new station entrance opens in Leeds. Leeds has one thing, which is nice. In 2015, also the new train operating company, the new talk coming into Transpennine Express awards, both Northern and Transpennine say we're going to introduce huge new train fleets. That's the promise in 2015. So in 2017, the Ordsall Accord is completed. Where's David's comment? David's line about what's being built when? Yes, the second city crossing opens in I think 2017 as well. Here's the Ordsall Accord. Here it is, looking very snazzy, of course. The trouble is, it's missing the really important bits. We've talked, we've already talked about this. If I whiz down here, it's as it is. So this is very nice, very shiny, but it's missing the important bits. If you remember, so it looks very nice. I think the view this way is what the ironically is what the Transpennine logo is referring to. It's referring to the view of this bridge, but from the side. Very strange, particularly given this doesn't actually form part of the scope of the project. Anyway, so where are we at? 2017. Unfortunately, in 2017, that's the end of the Northern Hub project is wrapped up. It's disappears into the ether. The Transport Works Act order. There is some doubt. Let's say doubt is casted by the Secretary of State for Transport on the future of platforms 15 and 16 at Piccadilly and the associated work. That's not the only thing. There's a lot of additional work, and the main bit being the grade separation at Piccadilly, particularly around Piccadilly, to enable it. So, 2018. What's happening in 2018? Well, in 2018, there's a re-announcement that electrification is back on the cards. Why? Because in an enormous panic, government realises that it doesn't have the trains to deliver the capacity or the timetable that it's planned for May of that year. It doesn't have... Yeah, let's talk about things. So we have a new timetable. This new timetable coming up in May of 2018. We have the proposed trains that were intended to use it either in sidings rusting or not built yet or late for delivery or not being cascaded into the right place because other trains haven't arrived yet. And also we have all of the grade separation work that is needed not happening. So to recap, we have the train fleet rusting or hasn't arrived yet that is supposed to deliver this timetable. We have the actual infrastructure needed to deliver the timetable has been forgotten about by the Secretary of State for Transport, meaning that the timetable collapses horribly. Hence the May 2018 timetable collapse in the north. We didn't have the trains, we didn't have the infrastructure, we had a timetable that was essentially made up, relying on imagined trains and imagined infrastructure. And this didn't go down very well, did it? In fact, it was a horrible, disastrous mess. So not good. So we ended up with, the what I would say is the entering of the rail industry into the cool zone, as we entered a horrible limbo which we still haven't escaped out of. I don't want to go through this in any more than the lightest of detail, but the issue with having built the Ord's Accord is actually here was that you created a link, which meant that delays up here ended up kind of rippling down to create delays down here in a way that hadn't happened before. As David points out, as a result of the lack of trains and infrastructure, we also didn't have the trained staff to drive the trains. So the whole thing was an absolutely shambolic mess. So yeah, in other words, we very rapidly stopped using the Ord's Accord. What else is there to talk about? Well, okay, so 2018, Transpennine Route Upgrade has been re-announced because government realised there's a mess. May 2018, timetable collapses. But what else is going on? Well, in 2019, HS3, or Northern Powerhouse Rail, or as I prefer to call it, the new Transpennine high-speed line, is repeatedly committed to by government, including by the Prime Minister of the day. Repeatedly committed to. And so, you think, oh, okay, good, that sounds good, great. Roll forwards to 2020, and the last bit of Metrolink new line is delivered. I think that's out to Media City. Is that right? Is that the Media City branch that's there? Yes. So, 2020 we have Metrolink kind of reaching the end of its basically proposed extents at this point. Hello Cross North programme. So where are we at? 2020, and we have in 2020 we have in theory we haven't got a properly formally cancelled grid separation of Northern Hub, although it's idling. We do have Transpennine Route Upgrade, working out what the hell it's supposed to be, and we do have a new line across the Pennines. Enter the integrated rail plan, because bye-bye. This piece of crap screws everything up, makes a mess of everything, wrecks HS2, gets rid of the new line across the Pennines, and enables, opens the door for everything to be cancelled completely. So yeah, that's the end of the new line across the Pennines. It gets swallowed into a sort of Transpennine Route ++ type situation, which continues to be called Northern Powerhouse Rail, but it no longer refers to a new line. It refers to lots of on-network upgrades. There's also discussion about Talabont going on here. Emir. Hello, Emir. What's people talking about? Are people doxing me in the chat here? I think I've talked about the fact that I'm from the Talabont near Aberystwyth. That is not from. That's where I moved to, where my parents currently live. So I'm doxing my parents, I suppose, which is fine. So that's not the end of the pain, I'm afraid, because this episode's already reached 9 o'clock. Good God, I knew this would happen. Don't worry, we're reaching the end of our tale, because in 2023 we had this announcement of a £72 million boost for rail journeys for people in Manchester and the North. Well, that sounds nice, doesn't it? £72 million. Oh wait, what does that actually mean? Wait a minute, let's just have a look at the details in here. Oh, look at this. In order to deliver for passengers quickly while providing value for money for taxpayers, Network Rail has today withdrawn a previous planning application for rail infrastructure work in the city. No details about this, but of course, as we talked about in previous Rail Natters, I can't even name my own bloody podcast. What this meant was the Transport and Works Act order for platforms 15, 16 and upgrades along the Castleford corridor was withdrawn. That was the end of that. Oh dear. That's the end of that. So what does that mean? Yeah, it means in 2023, that's the end of Northern Hub. It's gone. 72 million is just pissing into the wind. It's just, I'm not saying that's money that couldn't be usefully spent, but in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of the fact we're talking about replicating a underground railway network, a suburban segregation of railway service, 72 million pounds is enough to pay for nothing whatsoever. Possibly enough to pay for the design of that system. Fantastic. Yeah, marvellous. So 2023 though, Transpennine Route Upgrade is still happening. We still have Transpennine Route Upgrade at this point. That's quite exciting. So we do have a project continuing through all of this, battling its way, and indeed by this point. So from 2018, there's kind of this. They'd created, the project team had created this kind of modular approach to upgrades that they were drip feeding in through via the DFT, into Treasury and convincing Treasury to invest the money. There was a lot of in again out again over electrification, in again out again over gauge clearance. We will get someone on to talk about that scoping period because I think it's quite interesting. There's a lot to learn from how that battle went. I think it'd be good to get the person who's DFT side during that period as well. I think that would also be quite interesting. But Transpennine Route Upgrade continues. And indeed, in 2023, we had this confirmation that Transpennine Route Upgrade was becoming a multi-billion pound scheme of massive capacity upgrades, particularly in this central core of the route around the Huddersfield area, where an enormous amount of money is going to be spent on network capacity works, capacity enhancement, grade separation, etc., as well as for tracking and, of course, electrification. All of this stuff. Now, that's a lot of money for an on-network upgrade, because that's how much on-network upgrades cost. They're very expensive. So if you consider this is, that's 1/10 of the cost, 1/10 on basically two junctions here. That's 1/10 the cost of building the new line across the Pennines. You start seeing the scale that we're talking about here. So it continues to this day. And here we have it. We have Transpennine Route Upgrade with their fancy slogan saying on track to better. It exists. It's ongoing. And indeed, we will talk about it in future episodes because I want to talk more about the scheme, more about how it's working, more about what's being proposed. So we'll be the multiple episodes, I think, picking up what exactly has been done so far, what is what the process was like in getting. How on earth did you squeeze $4 billion out of Treasury? We want to understand this. So, George Marshall, you're absolutely right. That just shows why HS2 is a better idea than upgrading the West Coast Main Line. Yeah, for sure. The whole point of these new lines is that you essentially get an upgrade of the existing railway for free by the fact that you don't have to deal with this mix of services. That's the key. That is the key thing. Meanwhile, what happened to the Ordsall Cord? Yes, it's now reduced to one train in each direction per hour. That's already for 2 years. That's been the case. So, yeah, that's the story. Let's get my large face up. Go on. What are your questions? Chuck me questions. We'll answer them at the end. Just before we close off. Thanks for everyone for joining. As ever. In audio only format, the podcast it's a rapid end because there's more story to tell in the future, and I want to save it for another episode because it's 8 minutes past 9, and I want to wrap things up. In audio only format. Thank you for listening. Do drop reviews. Rate the podcast on Spotify. It's always nice if you give me a nice rating. If you hate it, fine, tell me. But on all good podcasting platforms, of course. Patreon.com/Gareth Dennis to support me doing more of this stuff. No questions, just an expression of despair, says Jamie Potts. Very nice. GarethDennis.co.uk/merch for the merchandise. The Build HS2 top looking increasingly excruciatingly ironic. But everyone should be wearing these when you speak to Labour MPs. I will be hopefully speak in advance of the general election. I intend to speak to the Shadow Secretary of State for Transport and the Secretary of State for Transport. I would very much like to speak to those people in advance of the general election. We'll see if we can. I fully intend to get that happening before the GE. PayPal.me/Gareth Dennis for loose change and abuse. GarethDennis.co.uk/Discord for not just the chat continuing forever, but there's about to be I'm going to do a little live stream after this for Patreon people. Come join if you're a Patreon person, come join the Discord server. That'd be fun to have you along. Next week is Rail Week, 5th to 11th of February 2024. They've moved it to February. I know we skipped a year, didn't we, somehow, probably for baby reasons. Well, 5th to 11th of February 2024 is Rail Week, run by the Young Rail Professionals. A pleasure to always work with them. And indeed, I just recorded next week's episode with a whole bunch of apprentices. It was great. So episode 204 is apprentice question time with the Young Rail Professionals, a bunch of YRP folks and some apprentices from across the industry. Actually, not hugely across the industry. Hopefully it'll be a better slice across the industry next year. But this year we had a bunch of people joining us and asking some terrific questions that got some really interesting answers. So it's honestly a really good episode next week. I can't wait for you all to watch it. In the meantime, let's get my giant face back. There is some there's a thing of Tony's Chocolonely here that I'm going to eat, possibly all of. There's also I was talking about the Azuma thing that was won by one of you a couple of weeks ago. Well, here's the one. Actually, it was last week, wasn't it? Here is the one that I use as the car, as my car fob. It's looking distinctively more bashed up. There it is. Look, it's looking a bit bashed up. Anyway, I digress. There's all sorts of other stuff down here, including, I think, is it a pen? No, that's not actually what I thought it was. I need to avoid picking too much of this stuff up because I'll once again dox myself. Fine, good, lovely. I can make use of some of this stuff. Fine. There's just a load of junk that I just found there that I'm like, I forgot about that. I'm in the middle of recording a podcast, so I should probably focus. Focus! It is February next week. It was November only a few days ago. Absolutely, Gareth. Yeah, that is quite something. So, will I be contributing evidence to Labour's review? No, they didn't give any time to do that. If they do another open call for evidence, then maybe. But they haven't done a very well publicised open call, which suggests that they kind of are doing. They've kind of got a mind made up situation. I hope not. It'd be nice to get Jürgen on. Maybe I'll reach out to him and see if he wants to come on and talk about it. But anyway. Do I have the date of each cancellation, month, year? Ooh, you could probably Google it and find them. I don't have them written down. I've just gone for the year. But you could probably find that fairly easily. If you have a question for me, please do at me. Do I know Emir Dervel's sister and family? LMAO. No, I don't off the top of my head, Gareth. Although probably if I met them, saw them, their faces, I'd probably go, oh yeah, hello, yes. It's that happens in Wales. Right, enough of that. There's no more questions with my atted name in. Can we nip the everything as part of Network North thing in the bud? At the last news article, everything is part of Network North. Oh, did that happen? Is that what they said in the last article? Really, is that what they said? Let me whiz back and see if that's what it said. Did it say that? Oh, as part of its Network North plan. Oh my God, yeah. Sorry, I'm just looking in and seeing that article. Painful. Anyway, right, enough of that. Everyone. Jürgen is cool. He's my former boss, but regardless of political colour, he speaks sense. Absolutely, I've been following Jürgen for a while. Jürgen and I have spoken. I know Jürgen from when he was at Siemens. It'd be great to get him on. Him being appointed was a moment of hope, but ultimately he's been put in that position to kind of give the answer that Labour want rather than giving the right answer. Unfortunately, that's just kind of how that kind of appointment works. But hopefully he'll be sufficiently trusted to push the envelope a little bit. Anyway, everyone, it's 2112 in the UK, and it's high time I left you all in peace and quiet. I will see you for a pre-record episode next week for the episode which I've just recorded. And then the week after that, I shall see you live again, I think, probably. Everyone, cheerio!